Does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, nice. I think this will get stored locally. Whatever. Okay, we'll figure it out. But yes, anyway, 3 suggestions that I have. So the debate's over. You don't know what to do. You have lots of people disagreeing. Both sides are making good points. How do you resolve it? Step 1 that I usually do is remember that if the debaters are giving you directions about how to resolve the debate, if you follow those directions, you are in the clear. So, for example, if a debater tells you, prefer evidence that's more recent because it assumes an important event, and the other side does not respond, you can comfortably be like, okay, I would have lots of ways to compare these 2 pieces of evidence, but the debater told me to care about recency, so I will care about recency. Or a debater might have told you, prefer impact claims that happen the fastest, or prefer impact claims that are the most likely to happen, even if they're smaller, right? Those are all examples of instructions that debaters can give judges that if the other team does not contest, just like with any other argument, there's a burden of rejoinder. If an instruction was given to you about how to resolve 2 claims and the other side has no counter instruction, then you can safely follow that, and that can help you reduce the complexity because you have a device you can use to break ties that the debaters provided for you. So that's my first piece of advice, is follow the debaters' directions, especially if they are uncontested. Piece of advice number 2 is look for concessions. So this is another way you can reduce the complexity of the information processing you have to do. Because if something's conceded, it's automatically true. So places where there's disagreement, there might be some risk that an argument is true, some risk that it's false. You have to reach some conclusion about what percentage chance maybe, you agree with the pro or the con, right? With concessions, you don't have to do that. So if the first thing you do is you start by looking for places where concessions happen, then you can start working like, okay, so this thing was conceded. Does that matter? Does that affect the rest of the round? Does that help me decide, right? And once you're thinking about those questions, you no longer have to be thinking about, is this thing true or not? You can know that it's true because it was conceded. So first advice, follow debater instructions. Second advice, look for concessions. Third advice is usually when I am judging, I will try to figure out what is the 1 or 2 issues which determine the round. So, for example, in this debate we just watched, one could look at the debate and say to themselves, okay, whoever wins that their side is better for fake news will win the debate. Because if fake news spreads, the activism contention doesn't work, because then social media has too much noise, too much nonsense. It becomes not a good activist organizing tool. So that helps you reduce complexity. You no longer have to think about all of the importance of activism. Does activism outweigh fake news? All of the stuff doesn't matter, because if you figure out that whoever wins the fake news issue wins the debate, then you can just focus in on that. And that will also help you avoid having to determine the truth of everything that's said. And it makes the debate simpler for you to think about and resolve. So 3 pieces of advice: follow debater directions, look for concessions, and look for important issues that you can use to decide large chunks of the debate at a time. Questions about any of that? Does that all make sense? Okay. So from here on, I wanted this to be more of kind of a discussion. So if you all had any difficulties that you came across as you were trying to decide, or you faced some kind of dilemma that you weren't sure how to resolve, or just any observations that you have about the judging process, I would love to hear it.
I got one quick comment about when you're giving results to students. Without fail, I will always tell the students, look, I'm judging on what you said, but my feedback are the things that I'm suggesting to help you in the future, because otherwise they take offense from, well, my opponents didn't say this, or they didn't point this out, or why are you attacking my speech? And I'm like, look, my feedback is for you. My decision is just how I felt about what you guys said. And if you don't clarify to students that your feedback and your ruling are separate, they take offense because they'll feel like you are against them if they lost.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Especially if students are not used to the idea that the judge is always right. If they didn't attend our workshops, we've been yelling about this for all 3 days, but maybe someone missed the memo. So yeah, that's absolutely true. You want to clarify the difference between your decisions and your track of my thoughts in my head. Yes, question.
Yes, I got two questions. First of all, basically, I think I just vote pro because I kind of got my bias. But in fact, I follow the contention and also the evidence provided by Anthony. So that's why I vote bias. I vote pro. Okay, so is that okay for me to have a little bit bias and also combine and follow with the debaters' speeches? And the second question is that you talk about that we focus on students' logic and their willingness and their attitude that they are willing to try to debate, to communicate. But what if I am the judge and somehow the students is not really got something like very serious grammatical pronunciation problems, and how am I to evaluate them, and what about the criteria that I'm supposed to be putting? Okay, thank you.
Two very good questions. So first, with respect to the issue of bias, like I said, it's not the end of the world if you are a little bit biased. And the reason I say that is, as humans, we're all biased. It's impossible to get rid of your bias completely. I would say do your best to filter out what you think from what is said by the debaters. So yes, I might be making an argument that you're listening to it and it sounds right to you, and that's part of how you go about assessing the argument. But if I say something and you're like, that doesn't make any sense, you should not dismiss what I said just because you don't think it's true. You should wait for the other team to make an argument about why it's not true. So it's okay if bias creeps in, but I would say do your best to try to filter out one from the other. And if you don't do it perfectly, it's fine. Again, not the end of the world. Just, try to vote mainly based on what debaters say instead of what you think. Your second question about grammar and presentation, I would say try not to evaluate grammar and presentation. So what we focused on so far is just voting for the content, right? So how good are the arguments? Of course, grammar and presentation might affect how you understand the content. So if I use bad grammar that was so bad, you just had no idea what I was saying, of course, that will affect how much you can vote on my content, because you're like, I don't understand this, so of course I can't vote for it because I don't know what you said. And in that case, that's okay to vote on grammar. But the important part is, did I communicate what I was thinking to you? So did you understand what I said? And if you did, I would say don't penalize students for having ineffective grammar. And I actually remembered what I forgot earlier, which is related to this idea. So you all, you obviously have lots of experience teaching English, so I'm sure you already know this, but I think it bears repeating that, because the students are putting themselves out there and the students are kind of doing something they're not comfortable with, something else I always do whenever I start a decision is actually something a few of the students did when they were giving their decisions, which is specifically say, like, I enjoyed this debate. I thought both of you did lots of stuff that is good. And especially if you're giving feedback, I would make a point of saying like both good things they did and bad things they did, just because, and again, you all know this, but I just want to like hammer it home because it's so important that we don't want to tear the students down. We want to make sure the students feel comfortable and remind them that there are good things that they're doing, so they're encouraged to stick with it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, got it.
Yep.
Okay, I'll just quickly add in, it will be within 30 seconds. So like most of the things about English pronunciation and grammar, a lot of it has to do with their prior training, which is like elementary school and middle school. That accounts for around 8 to 9 years. And, you know, you can't really like completely eradicate that within like 1 or 2 years of high school, even if they meet a really good teacher. So like, I usually, as judge, I don't penalize them on that. What I do is I try to understand what they said, and then afterwards I would tell them my decision, whether it was a win or loss. But then I'll also tell them like how to do self-help and how to make themselves better in the face of, you know, lack of training, like where are you going to get it and stuff like that. So, and I understand that English teachers in Taiwan have a very strict like principle and stuff, and I know it's hard. So what I would say is maybe you put a piece of paper and then like on your judging sheet, and then just tell yourself like whenever you feel like the pronunciation is bad, just like right on the side, pronunciation is not the key point of debate. And then like, you know, just put it there. I know it's hard. It's really hard. It is really hard. I understand.
So anyway, argument matters. Okay, thank you.
Argument matters. The only reason why pronunciation or grammar to me is critical as a judge is that I want the opponents to understand each other. And that also can be if your team feels that their English ability is beneath or lower than, we'll say they're debating Anthony there. He may be using words that they don't understand. It's actually Anthony's job to help them understand what he is trying to say. So if he's choosing words, like earlier he did the one where he was talking about history, might have been a better word choice. If he chose a word that his opponents don't understand, they shouldn't feel bad about that. They should be like, what do you mean by this? And then he should be like, oh, I'm sorry. What I mean is, and it's his responsibility to make his points clear to both the judges and his opponents. So that's where grammar comes into play for me, is do the teams understand each other?
Yeah, and as a judge, so the way that I would fix that though is I would actually be more lenient for a team that is clearly struggling with their English. So like that would be an adjustment that I would make to this burden of rejoinder idea, right? So like, let's say one side says something super complicated, the other team clearly doesn't get it because of the language barrier. If they don't make a response right away, if it takes them a little bit to figure out what the other side is talking about, I'll be way more flexible about letting them come up with a response later, or maybe they miss, you know, they don't respond correctly the first time, but then later they kind of get it. If it's clearly a language barrier issue, that's an area where I would be a little more forgiving for the team that while they're technically not exactly following the structure, you know, yeah, we're mainly here to learn, so it's not the biggest deal in the world if you know, the structure is a little bit warped for that purpose.
I have seen teams that intentionally put complicated language because they're trying to trick their opponents, which I look down upon. I do not like teams that do that. I mean, obviously, I still have to rate them according to their debate, but that's one of the feedback tips that I would say is, you know, you guys are intentionally making this overly complicated. Simplify it.
And just between teachers, like when students do that, it makes me feel like they're aggravating or showing like the gap between the rich and the poor. But then that's just my opinion. Like feeling like you're putting like more than two a complex sentence that goes more than 2 lines on a piece of legal pad. That's really purposely confusing other people. And I don't agree with that either.
Random thing that I want to throw in, Einstein quote had said that if you can't simplify something down to like a 2nd grade level, then you don't know it well enough yourself. And so all of these concepts, like if you were to ask them, put this in your own words, and they can't because they're stuck with all those whatever terminology that they want to throw in, then they lose credibility. You know, just thought.
Yeah, what's up?
I have question. Um, since you've already been a English debate in Taiwan, how would you see the cultural 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 aspect? How does it plays, and how do you separate them? Because like my previous question, I said, for me it seems that during the debate, some question or some manners for me as a Taiwanese, or maybe it's just me, we interpret that as impolite. But for some cultures, it might not be impolite. So how would you see? How does culture plays, or how does culture affect our judging, or your judging, or what's your observation? What's your observation of the role of the culture that plays in the debate, especially during the international debate?
Sure. So that's an excellent question, and also a very broad question. So I'll focus in on, I guess, two. I'll mention a couple of things. So one is, so with respect to the politeness issue, I will say that while it is a bit of a culture shock in some cases, I will say I think that with the politeness issue, that's one where it's hard to that's one where it's hard to compromise. So there are many places where it's possible to make an adjustment and desirable to make an adjustment to make it more comfortable, right? This is one where I think there are many things that are just inherent to debating that are hard to change, and that if you were giving away this element of debating, you would be losing something that is kind of the core of the activity. So like you mentioned earlier, right? Like, it would be impolite for me to stand up and say, like, you are wrong, right? You would want to phrase that a little bit more diplomatically. You want to maybe say, oh, I want, excellent point. I want to raise another dimension of the issue, or, some kind of more equivocating, or like some more, I don't know, like some more compromising way of phrasing it. But in debate, like, there's a direct competitive cost, which is you're watering down your argument. You win by disagreeing with the other side. And if insofar as that clashes with being rude or clashes with a sense of politeness, I think that's an element of politeness that's worth giving up for this situation.
Just like in my mind, you have to teach them that this is a game and this is a sport if they don't understand. Because I mean, of course, it would be unacceptable for me to go up and punch Anthony in the face. But if we were in a boxing ring, I'm going to punch him in the face. It's a sport. So this is a sparring match. It's even called sparring, which means fighting. So it is a little bit out of a comfort zone, culturally more so for some than others. But that's the sport. So,
Yeah, I can understand that it's like a sport, but for me, I discovered that it's also like a cuisine competition. You could have your plate, but everyone has different taste, has different flavor about different dishes. So there is concrete rules about the games, but also it seems there's another space that we could be favoring in different parts. So, and I was wondering if the culture will play the rules in the flavoring, or does it like cross the line that I should keep the rule, but no, that's a cultural thing, or is that a cultural thing, or it's based on the rules?
Well, so you actually, I mean, what this is telling me is, if I am a different coach in this session and I'm listening to you airing this concern, what that tells me is if I see you on a panel judging my debaters, I'm going to be telling them in the pre-round, you need to be really careful to be super polite, go out of your way to make your opponents feel comfortable, let them save face, don't accuse their arguments of being cardinally wrong, because that is clearly something that makes you uncomfortable as a judge. And that is something the debaters should adjust to, right? And if I'm coaching, that's your right. You know, it's your right to react however you want. It's the debater's job to adjust to you and convince you. And part of that means meeting you on the cultural terms where you are. Like, you know, it's not for me as a debater to tell you, like, you're reacting to me wrong. Again, the judge is always right. And if you're the judge, you're always right. I need to do something that makes you feel comfortable with the way that I'm debating. At the same time, it goes the other way too. Like if you're coaching your debaters and I'm the one judging them, you'll want to tell the debaters, like, I have a cold, dead heart. I do not care about the kids, you know, disagreeing with each other. I have, you know, I'm much less concerned with the form in which they present their objections. Like, I don't care if they're diplomatic about it. I would rather they just save the time and be direct. So you as a coach would tell your debaters that's something that works for Anthony. And that depends. And of course, there's an element of culture in this. You know, whenever we have communication across cultural boundaries, culture obviously looms large. But I guess so. I guess the takeaway is, you know, it's the way that the filter for all of this is this relationship between the judge and the student, and the fact that the student is trying to convince the judge at the end of the day. Does that help? I don't know. It's definitely a complicated issue, and the answers aren't easy in any situation like this. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm right in my interpretation of debate, because it's all judge dependent. But does that, I don't know.
What worries you the most? Like, what is the most, what are you concerned about? Like, I want to know whether we could answer it. Yeah.
Maybe it's because I have no experience in debate. It's just my questions about what I see and my I think it's just curiosity.
Oh, forgive me for being direct. Like, I really want to know the root of the worry so that we could help you out. Because, like, I know curiosity is a very polite term to explain something that people in Taiwan can't really explain at the moment. But I really want to know what worries you so that we could help you.
No,
like, are you worried
no,
penalized for the wrong reason?
not worried. Maybe I'm just worrying that I did not express clearly of my question, but it seems that well, I would describe that the debate I observed during the past few days, it seemed yeah, it's like a sport, and it's also like a quizzing competition. Like I mentioned, it seems there's rules, standard rules. You should do that, and this. But also there's some spaces, flexible spaces for each judges, for each team members to do what I can. Or so it's just I want to. Probably I just want to know the boundary of the rules and flexibility. And
I hear what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, if your students go into a room, it's important to ask the judge whether they have clear preferences. Like if they have clear preferences, they will tell you. Like, so you could ask up front, like, judges, what are your preferences? Okay, thank you, judge. Yeah, like these are things you could ask. Yeah, like go up and talk to them before the tournament, the match starts.
The direct answer to your question about rules versus these soft areas of flexibility is the rules are as follows. What is the topic? How long are the speeches? One team has to win the debate. That is it. Everything else is not written down anywhere. It's a set of norms that we have as a community for how we decide. Like, there's no rule book that says you as a judge are breaking the rules if you make a biased decision. There's no rule book that says the judge is obligated to flow the debate using a particular thing with like columns and like lining things up. There's no rule that says the teams have to argue in the same order that their previous speech did, right? Those are just ideas that we came up with all together to help each other communicate and to standardize the way that we debate for each other. But really, all of that stuff, it's not a rule. Like, we've said things that are a good idea. We've explained why we think they're a good idea. But really, there's way more flexibility than it seems. Like, for example, at the end of the day, you know, we've been saying so far, you vote for whichever team convinces you more. But in my judge philosophy, actually, there's a website for policy debaters in the US called tabroom.com, where every judge writes out what they believe about debate and how they will decide. Nate has one, I have one. They spell out our preferences. They explain like what we think is important. And in my judge philosophy, it says, if you are racist in your speech, I will vote against you. I don't care if you make a better argument. I don't care if you prove your side of the resolution. If you are a racist, you lose. So there's no rule anywhere that says that. That's just how I judge. If I will not vote for someone who is a racist. I will also not vote for someone who engages in physical violence. I will not vote for someone who tells their opponent to kill themselves. I won't do it. It's like, it's against the spirit of what we're doing. Like, no, it's like part of my job is to educate students. You know, I'm not just a referee. And, you know, I have certain principles that if you violate my principles, I won't vote for you. So it's, you know, and what you're bringing up is really just a less extreme version of that. Like, you have certain things that you believe students should follow, like certain standards of behavior, certain standards for how we should go about arguing with one another. And from there, it's kind of up to you.
I was just going to throw in that, you know, when it came to rules, you talked about there's like specific, this speaker goes first. So that's debate structure. And that is that you have a certain amount of time, you have a certain amount of things to do. And then depending on the tournament, there may be rules that they have to follow, which could vary a little bit, considering like for public forum, there normally is, you know, single debaters talking for the crossfire and then grand crossfire. Some places they allow open crossfire. For NT and U, they're going to be doing, from what I understand, grand crossfire, meaning everyone can talk every time. So same things with like prep time. So each tournament is going to have its own rule set. But as far as judging goes, yeah, you judge the way you feel or are swayed, and nobody can say you're wrong. Just have a reason why you say it. I think that's the most critical thing. You can't just be saying, you know, I voted pro, the end, you know, mic drop, you know. Gotta have a reason for it.
One thing I will add is part of the reason I feel comfortable having these extra rules for how I decide, like I won't vote for a racist, is that I do have a judge philosophy where it's written down. Like, anyone who's judged by me can click on my name and go and read this thing and see, like, if you're racist, you lose, and then hopefully they will adapt to me by not being racist. If you don't have a judge philosophy like on the internet, that's totally okay. It's just, if you have these extra rules for how you decide, that's something that I would try to make clear to the debaters before the round starts. So like, everyone comes in the room and you might mention, hey, just so you know, politeness is something that I really value as a judge. So if you want to succeed in front of me, this is something that you should take very seriously in how you construct your arguments and how you give your speeches. So.
Very good point. And NTNU doesn't normally give debaters the opportunity to read, you know, judges' preferences, but I often will tell students when they come in, here is what I like to see. boom. And then I say, this is what I'm looking for. And that way they all know Nate doesn't like it when you're, a little a-hole to the other team. I hate it, So yeah, just say you want them to be polite. Good.
Someone has their hand up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Oh.
Accidental. Okay, sorry. Nothing. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so the judges could be subjective, right? That sounds like it could be.
Yes.
All right.
And you will be. It's impossible not to be, I would say.
I mean, debate is very dynamic. It's not like we could bring an AI in, but then what good would that do to debate? And we could bring in a test machine, but then what good would that do for if we standardize the whole thing? Then there's no point of debate. Yeah, because debate is all about the reaction from the crowd. Ultimately, we're trying to train them to be persuasive, to be logical, and then to back it up with substantial evidence and line of reasoning. So, the judges is their crowd. Yeah, the judging group is their crowd.
Just by the way, I'm not leaving yet, but if you want to leave, we are technically in lunch break, so you can absolutely feel free to get out of here.
Do we just leave the breakout room, or
putting that? Yeah. If you just return to the main room, that's totally good. But I'm sticking around if you want to continue talking about this, or if you have any other questions that you want to raise.
I would like to ask more questions. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That's why we're here.
Yeah, I'm trying to be like culturally polite in my culture. That's how to say. Since English, it's not our native language, how would you see that there might be some misunderstanding because English is not our first language? How would you judge that?
Well, I think the only real solution is just basically a more extreme version of what we've already said. So being a blank slate as best we can, not just in terms of the arguments, but
just word. Sorry, just the word blank slate. I didn't catch that word. Blank
slate. Yeah.
Slate.
Oh, so this is a debate term. So it comes from the Latin, I think, phrase tabula rasa. And that's our debate idea for when you come into the round, you are a blank slate, you are receiving the debater's arguments, and you are trying to leave your preconceptions or your ideas at the door. So when you judge, you try to be as neutral and as objective as you can be. Now, like we said, it's impossible to really do that, but that's the ideal that we're all trying for. And I think
the word slate me is like a blackboard, because it used to be a blackboard or a board you write on. So blank means erase, clear all of your own things before you start the debate. So yes, he's doing the Latin of it, but I think the terminology slate is what was confusing you. It basically means an empty board. You're not full of your own opinions. You're not using your own knowledge. You're going to be writing down on the board or on your note sheet, your flow sheet, what they say, meaning erase everything, not that you're a dummy, but that you are not starting with, I think the pro side should win because the pro side is correct in my opinion for these reasons. You start with an empty paper, you fill it with what they say, and then that leads you to your decision. That's the blank slate in the regards of like an empty chalkboard. Chalkboard meaning slate is an old term for, did you bring your slate? Did you bring your rock chalkboard? Sorry.
Yeah. No, thanks. That's a good point. And this is actually, I mean, it's a great example of, us miscommunicating or misaligning about something. But so as in terms of how this could affect your judging. I would say, so we've been talking about how judges should try to be neutral and objective and leave their bias behind for the arguments. And when you do that, it's not easy to do. It requires conscious effort to do. So if a debater says something you think is wrong and the other side doesn't point that out, it takes work to in your head be like, okay, I know I don't agree with this, but I need to take it at face value for now because the other side didn't respond. I think something similar is probably required for the cultural element, right? So not just being a blank slate with our knowledge, but being as blank as it's possible to be with these cultural issues. And it also requires active work. Like if you see something, I mean, really this is more work that I should be doing as a judge, right? Because I'm the one who's a guest. I'm the one who is a stranger intruding into a place where I don't belong necessarily, right? So it requires me to be patient, and it requires me to be constantly actively working and being aware of the fact that when I see something I don't understand, that I need to be aware of the cultural undertone and this layer that structures the way that we relate to one another. And so I guess there's a layer of this, which is what's the practical advice for students? And that's what I said earlier, which is the practical advice for students is your judge is who your judge is, and you have to do your best to persuade them no matter who they are. In terms of what we need, in terms of what judges need to do to help the students the best way, just patience and understanding and constantly being aware of this underlying layer is important. And I don't know, it's never going to be perfect because, like you said, there are these elements that are different about our upbringing and about the way that we respond to how other people interact with us. And that's going to happen. And it's just something that we need to be aware of and do our best to work through. And it's a process that's sometimes frustrating and it doesn't happen perfectly, but patience and understanding, I guess, is the only real answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, really, really good question, and I really appreciate that you brought this up, because I know that I don't know, it's given the way that we presented this issue, it's not. But I appreciate that you foregrounded this issue in our discussion. It was a very valuable dimension to what we were saying, that in our initial way of formulating this, we did not give adequate airtime to. So I appreciate that.
Sorry, give adequate.
Like we didn't focus on it enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions or concerns? All right. If there is nothing else about judging, I will let you all go to lunch. I will not be coming back for the second half of today because I will be going to bed. However, I leave you in Shanna's very capable hands, and you all will get some experience watching your students debate and seeing all that they've learned. So I hope you all enjoy that, and I hope you all enjoy your lunches.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for your lectures and patience. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all for coming. Really, my pleasure.
Thank you.
But yeah, enjoy your lunch and enjoy your afternoon.
Yeah, have a good day. Bye.